Happy Monday, 7th and 8th grade. It is Monday, May 11th, and we are still in our human development chapter and module, and in my favorite, if you couldn't tell by the previous videos, topic of nutrition. And so we're going to go over the answers to the nutrition facts labels problems from the previous video. So make sure you have those and you can just double check that you were able to calculate these properly. All right, so the first one was how many calories are in one serving? The correct answer was 230. So one serving size of this particular food was 2/3 of a cup, or 55 grams, and it has 230 calories. Number two was how many calories are in 3/4 cup serving of this food? And the correct answer is 360 calories because one serving is 1/4 of a cup. So you needed to multiply that for 3/4 of a cup. So 120 times 3, 360 calories would be in 3/4 of this 3/4 cup serving of this particular food. And problem number 3, how many calories are in one container? So it's telling us here that there are 4 servings in one container. And if you calculated the carbs, lipids, and proteins, then you would have gotten 350 calories. And you need to times that by 4 if we're eating the entire container of this food, which would be 1,400 calories. All right, so now let's take a closer look at the macronutrients of carbs, lipids, and proteins. We're going to be focusing on carbohydrates in this video, okay? But as you can see, the macronutrients are represented, as we said, on the nutrition facts label, but there's also some other things underneath some of them. There's nothing underneath protein, but you see under total carbohydrates, for example, we have dietary fiber, total sugars, and added sugars. And under fats, we have saturated fat and trans fat. And so we're going to be looking at how these different things are represented on the nutrition facts label. All right, so we're going to start with carbs, as I said. Carbohydrates are organic compounds that are composed of simple sugars. And in science, we call simple sugars monosaccharides. Mono for being one or simple versus complex, which we're about to get into in a second. And carbohydrates are what are responsible for storing and providing energy for your body. It's typically what most people use as their energy source. There are exceptions to that, but it's for energy production. And the carbohydrates that we consume are utilized to help us grow and to function and carry out many of the processes that our body does and needs to do to keep us alive and healthy. And there are both simple and complex carbohydrates. So simple carbohydrates are simply just called sugars. They occur in many forms. It's what you think of when we say sugar, like table sugar is one example of a simple carbohydrate. And so it does come in many forms. Here are just some of the examples. Sucrose is a sugar, and that's the common table sugar that if you were to put in your coffee, a couple scoops of sugar, that's what you're putting in is sucrose. Fructose, which is found in honey and some ripe fruits, as well as it's the main component of the chemicalized version of high fructose corn syrup. That's what HFCS stands for. Glucose, which is found in grapes, berries, and oranges. Galactose, which is found in milk and dairy products. Lactose, also found in milk and dairy products. Maltose, which is found in barley. And xylose, which is found in wood or straw. And hopefully by now, you know that Mrs. Wojcik is a big fan of telling you about the prefixes and the suffixes of different words. But hopefully you saw the pattern here. OSE, we've mentioned this before in class. We've talked about ASE and how that ending typically indicates that something is an enzyme. Well, if you see OSE, you can know that that is typically going to be a sugar. So all of these end in OSE. Complex carbohydrates are made of sugar molecules, the monosaccharides, and they're linked together to form longer chains. Okay, so we said in the previous slide that glucose was one example of a simple sugar or a monosaccharide. So here's just one glucose. This is a simple sugar, this is a monosaccharide. However, we can link them together, and this is chemistry, and you're not expected to draw these or anything. This is just showing you the structure, but we can link multiple of these glucose molecules together to form a chain. And when we do that, when we link them together and they form a chain, then we get complex carbohydrates. Okay, and complex carbohydrates form starches. So think pasta, bread, potatoes. Okay, so starches are long chains of monosaccharides. And some types of complex carbohydrates are actually indigestible by humans, so we can't digest them. And these indigestible carbohydrates are the main component of fiber. And I know you've heard of fiber before. And so fiber is a type of carbohydrate. Starch is a type of carbohydrate. And that's why you see on the nutrition facts label, dietary fiber is indented and underneath the total carbohydrate count, because it is being included in that number that we used to calculate those problems before. So vegetables, fruits, and grains, those things all contain fiber, and so they're considered complex carbohydrates. This is in contrast to, say, table sugar or junk food, which is made up of a lot of the simple carbohydrates, so the one glucose molecule versus long chains like in fiber and starch. Talking a little bit more about fiber, there are actually two main types of fiber. So there's insoluble and there's soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber just means that it's not able to dissolve in water, whereas soluble fiber can dissolve in water. That's why we say insoluble, okay, versus soluble. And if you were to eat insoluble fiber, it adds bulk to your stool or your poop and increases the gastric motility, or it speeds up how fast food moves through your intestines in digestion. Whereas soluble fiber, if you were to consume soluble fiber, it creates more of a gel in the intestines because it can dissolve in water. And this actually slows gastric motility a little bit and can actually help for people who have diarrhea. I know, gross, we're talking about poop here, but that's what happens when you talk about nutrition. And so most foods, though, contain both soluble and insoluble fiber. Like, there's very few foods that are one and not the other. You're going to have trace amounts of one or the other in a kind of a balance. And some foods are pretty equal. They have equal amounts of insoluble and soluble fiber. So it's very rare that you'd be isolating and just eating one of these two types of fibers. You're more than likely throughout the day consuming a wide range of both. All right, and so we already looked at total carbs in the previous lesson. And as I said, now we're going to notice further that it's divided. We see dietary fiber shows up here as well as sugars. And on the previous nutrition label, there was that added row of added sugars. So you'll see that commonly on a lot of nutrition labels. As well as occasionally on specialty food items, you may even see something called sugar alcohols, which is another whole category. But all four of these fall under total carbohydrates. All right? And so that is what we're going to look at for that. But I want you to stop and think, okay? So we just said that we get calories from the food that we digest. We know this. We eat, calories in, and we get nutrients, right? And we said that complex carbohydrates that form fiber are indigestible. So if we can't digest complex carbs in the form of fiber, then do those calories count? Because we know that fiber is a carbohydrate, as we just said, and we know from previous lessons that you get 4 calories for every gram of fiber, or I'm sorry, for every gram of carbohydrate. But again, that's carbohydrates that we've digested, and we said fiber can't be digested, so do we get those calories? So think here. The answer is no, we don't, actually. You don't get calories from fiber. So we actually get something called net carbohydrates. And what that is you can subtract the amount of total carbohydrates and take from it the amount of dietary fiber, and in some cases, sugar alcohols, again, mostly on specialty foods. And when you do that, you actually get the net carbs, the actual amount of carbohydrates that's contributing to calories in your body. And so this is actually really common amongst people who follow low carbohydrate diets like Atkins or keto or paleo. There's lots out there. But you've probably heard buzzwords about low carb diets before, somewhere, either in the store, on a food package, or an advertisement of some sort. And so this is commonly used for people who are following those types of plans, but it's important to know and understand that not all the carbohydrates that you take in actually contribute to your calorie intake. And so if we were to do this without, let's just forget the sugar alcohols for right now, because that's probably less important for you to worry about. Let's just say we wanted to calculate the total number of net carbs in this food. Okay, it's saying that the total is 13. We would just subtract the dietary fiber, which would give us 10. So we would say that there are 10 net carbs in this food. And if we take it further and we subtract the 6 of the sugar alcohols, that's how they got the 4 here, because the only carbs that are taken into account in this is going to be these 4 grams of sugar, because those do contribute to your calories. All right? And so this image is just to summarize the differences between complex carbs versus simple carbs. Most of the foods down here under simple carbs are made of those monosaccharides, and most of it's junk food. It's gonna be not great for your system. Whereas up here you find a lot more fiber and starches, and that's why these are complex carbohydrates. All right, so your homework for this lesson is going to be answering the following questions. So you probably want to pause this video here in a minute and write all this down, or take a screenshot or something of it so that you can do your work. So number 1, you're going to explain the difference between a simple and a complex carbohydrate, and then give 3 food examples of each. All right. Number 2, you're going to calculate using the nutrition label that is right here. Okay. You're going to calculate net carbohydrates as we just did in the previous slide. Okay. And then finally, number 3, you're going to arrange the following food items in order from lowest carbohydrate to highest carbohydrate. And make sure that when you're doing this, you're taking into consideration net carbohydrates. All right. So you will need to visit the websites for these different companies to check the nutrition facts label. All right, so it's good to understand and to know that you can find the nutrition facts and the ingredients and the allergens for any food by visiting the company's website. And so you're going to visit the company websites for like Honey Nut Cheerios, Oreos, Wonder Bread, Barilla pasta, etc., etc. And I've given you the serving size for everything. So you're just going to put these in order from the highest carbs to the lowest carbs, and make sure you don't forget to take into consideration net carbs by removing that fiber. All right, so that is your homework. Please email me if you have any questions about this, or you need help, or you're not understanding. I am happy to help you along. That's what I'm here for. And with that, I will see you for our next lesson on Wednesday.